Jantar Mantar became the site. The Cockroach Janta Party became the voice. The problem was universal. Is this merely a protest or the early signs of an uprising of the younger generation towards the old political guard? Is there a political solution to all of this in the Indian political system? Let's find out with Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. Hello, sir.
Hello, Aditya.
Sir, last time we had talked about the Cockroach Janta Party. It was an online satirical movement moment in history, right? 5 million rough followers. Now that number has quadrupled, I assume. And June 6th is when they have called for their first offline protest, right? This is going to happen at Jantar Mantar. Before I talk about the protest and everything, all of that, my first question to you is how do you see dissent playing in democracy? Because this phenomena is new. An online presence, such large number, is new. How do you see dissent playing its role in the new age of democracy?
Aditya, dissent online may be new, but dissent has been very integral to Indian democracy. We are very proud of that. The whole series of demonstrations and protests and strikes and other things in the 1970s are what led to emergency ultimately. And even when the law explicitly prohibited, in my judgment, unconstitutionally, because they suspended civil liberties during the emergency, there was this quiet dissent undercurrent across the country with a lot of organization that led to the ouster of Mrs. Indira Gandhi in the ensuing election in 1977. Post 77, we've been living dissent every day, protest every day. So if the right to peaceful protest is not recognized in a democracy, it's no longer a democracy. Mere the act of voting does not constitute a democracy. That's why, if you recall, in Andhra Pradesh, some years ago, almost 9 years ago, if I recall, the then opposition, which is also the opposition in Andhra Pradesh now, they wanted to organize a protest on the 26th of January, Republic Day. On the pretext that it's a Republic Day, the then government officials banned it and arrested all the protesters or intending protesters. I publicly criticized the government. You cannot, under any circumstances, curtail the right to protest peacefully in a democracy. Yes, on a state occasion like Republic Day, Independence Day, they have no right to come onto the streets where they please. In fact, they have no right to come onto the streets anytime, anywhere. So non-obstructive forms of protest, and in occasions like 15th August or 26th January, in a place that is designated which does not dislocate the state functions or something, but the right to protest is inherent. That must be respected. The protesters also must respect that there are limits to the right to protest. Now, Dr. Ambedkar, on the 26th of November 1949, the day the Constitution actually was approved, it came into force 2 months later on 26th January, but it was approved on 26th of November. He made a very seminal speech. He said, now that we have the right to vote, now that we have constitutional freedoms, our forms of protest must be democratic, peaceful, and constitutional. You cannot have obstructive forms of protest. They cannot be Rasta Rokos. They cannot be Bands and Hartals. During the freedom struggle, when we had no rights, we were treated as subjects. It was understandable that we had to mobilize people with whatever we had. The 1942 movement, for instance, the Quit India movement, was fairly violent despite Mahatma Gandhi's entreaties. I think an estimated 10,000 people died. Public infrastructure was destroyed in many places in the country. That simply is not something that we can never condone. We can never condone. So we have to have a balance, but the right to protest is absolute in terms of the right. But the manner of protest can be moderated, can be regulated within reasonable restrictions.
Sir, you talked about dissent and how it is an integral part of democracy. And you also mentioned Baba Sahib Ambedkar here, right? You said democratic, peaceful means, right?
Non-obstructive. In Indian
Non-obstructive.
context, non-obstructive.
Yes.
Because protest
Non-obstructive.
in India typically means obstructive. The more obstructive it is, the more eyeballs it captures.
Yes.
And the more successful it is regarded as.
Yes.
That's simply not right.
So, in that context, traditional civil society spaces have always relied on this form of protest, right? Be it press conferences, you have, petitions are filed, but they inevitably, in the Indian context, they end up either being sort of oriented. They end up being demonized by the government. Media starts playing them, calls them foreign sort of investment is foreign. There is some funding here and there. What recourse is left for people like us, for people youngsters who have no form of, there's no agenda here or vilified agenda. If not, then sort of to go on streets and protest.
No, protest. Why should you go into the streets? Go to other public spaces without obstructing. Like for Delhi, Janta Mantar is a perfectly safe space. You can seek permission to go to another public place, but outside a road, not a road. In Hyderabad, I don't know what is the current situation. Indira Park or some other place was habitually the place of protest. So many maidans and parade grounds, you can use them. Take permission, and permission should be granted as a general rule, unless there is another pressing public need for that facility on that day. As long as it's not obstructive or not violent, it must be the norm that the right to protest is granted. I remember vividly, even an organization of questionable credentials in the context of the left-wing extremist movement, the Revolutionary Writers Association. They approached me when I was a district magistrate to hold a state-level conference. Many their leaders came. I said, yes, go ahead. They were all perplexed. They said, look, we came to you with a request expecting that you'll say no, which is habitually the case. Then we'd raise some nara denge, we'll raise some slogans against you and the government. We'll go out and meet the press and give a fiery statement. Whereas you're saying you go ahead and hold the conference. We don't know what to do. I said, if you wanted to organize a conference, you organize it. If you actually have the courage to invite me, I will also come there and tell you how shallow your whole idea and your ideology is. That's not a problem. So the norm is allow the protest. But the form of protest can be regulated, as I said. Okay. There cannot be two opinions. But you cannot use roads. The Indian habit of, no, I'm angry, therefore I will block the road. No, you have no right to take away somebody else's freedom. You want to exercise your freedom, the right to protest. What about the right of millions of people to travel, to use the road for transport, or to use some other facility or a train or something else? You cannot stop economic activity. You cannot shut down shops forcibly. You cannot block the roads. And most of the bands and hartals basically are forcible shutdown of shops. We pretend that it's all voluntary. In 99 out of 100 cases, these are all forced. That's not acceptable.
So now that we have some agreement on how protest is integral, it's just the manner that we can disagree and sort of have different opinions on. I just previously had mentioned this and I want to sort of build upon that, right? The idea that people, whoever is dissenting, whoever is protesting, they're either anti-nationals, right? They're people who do not care about the country. This time something unique is happening and I want sort of you to spend some time on this, right? Media generally tends to do this, especially Hindi media tends to paint a picture of a specific group of people. They're anti-national. They're not anti-government. I'm using words very carefully. They are anti-national. This time around, it's getting difficult for them to demonize something as the Cockroach Janta Party. Because it is so organic, or as it looks like, it looks so organic, it's becoming really difficult for them to sort of demonize this movement or moment, as I said. What do you think about this? What do you think media has, because I remember rarely has media sort of taken these protests and put them in a light where sort of it is given, even for example, farmers protest, and whether we agree or disagree. But the fact that protesters were vilified, right? Media could be right, could be wrong. What do you think media's role in protests or dissent is?
There are two basic things we have to consider. The state is not a government. The nation is not equal to the government. The nation is much more than all of us constitute the nation. Indian nation is not a government in the state. It's not a government at the union level. It's not one state organ. It is all of us together. The Indian nation is much bigger than the government. So a protest against the government, a criticism of the government does not constitute an attack on the nation. It's an obvious point, but occasionally it requires to be reiterated so that there's no confusion in the minds of many well-meaning people. And as long as it is peaceful, let me reiterate, as long as you're not breaking up the nation, on that I'm pretty clear. The Constitution is clear, but I also feel emotionally about it. As long as you're not here to undermine the Constitution itself, because you cannot use the constitutional freedoms to undermine the Constitution. that cleverness cannot be tolerated. It has to be curbed. And as long as public order is not vitiated, the reasonable restrictions prescribed in the Constitution, and our founding fathers were extremely wise. The First Amendment itself, piloted by the then Law Minister, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, the architect of the Constitution, and the first Prime Minister of India who actually built many democratic institutions in the country, they together brought in the First Amendment to the Constitution. They clearly specified the reasonable restrictions. Restrictions are necessary, no freedom is absolute, but the restrictions have to be reasonable. So any restriction has to be subject to that broad umbrella, subject to that. So an attack or criticism or a protest or an agitation against a government is not against the nation. There cannot be two opinions. Second, a wise governance and administrative system, from national to local issues, will actually encourage people's feedback, whatever be the form of feedback. It may be a protest demonstration, it may be a petition, it may be criticism in the media, it may be a public meeting, it may be in other forms. Whatever be the form, the moment you think that any criticism or any feedback is a nuisance, not only is it undemocratic, that is the constitutional part, it actually makes you dysfunctional as a government. Now, the reason why emergency ultimately became inevitable, I suppose, is in the 1970s, about 25 years after the freedom, many people were expressing their angst, like today, Cockroach Janta Party, about the pattern of development, pattern of growth. There is an angst now. Where are we? Where are we getting the fruits of development? This is a very legitimate concern. Now, the answers may not be what they are thinking they are. They're much more complicated, long term, but there is a problem. Similarly, in 1972-73, the young people all over the country, they started raising issues of corruption, poverty, unemployment. The three big challenges. Then, in some ways, while poverty is not that serious, corruption and unemployment in the organized sector are big issues even today. The thing is, we have moved quite a bit. We corrected some mistakes, but we have still some way to go. Now, if the governing system across the country dealt with that in a very sensible and sensitive manner, if they tried to get the feedback and had a constructive response, sat with the people and say, look, where have we gone wrong? Where have we done right? Is there now a course correction required? Probably emergency would not have been necessary. And did emergency help the people in power survive? No, not at all. They prolonged their tenure by blatantly undemocratic but constitutional methods, because they amended the constitution to give themselves the power to extend the tenure of the parliament or state legislatures for that period, which is blatantly undemocratic. But that's about it. The moment elections were there, they were decimated. Second, because there was no feedback, they were not even aware of what was going wrong. Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who is widely believed, was advised by the intelligence agencies and others in 1977, when the idea of elections was mooted, that she was immensely popular, people are incredibly happy, trains are running on time, therefore she'll be re-elected to power, and so on and so forth. And the actual result we have seen. I remember in 1980, when Mrs. Gandhi visited, I think 82 probably, I think it was 82, when Mrs. Gandhi visited the National Academy, Mussoorie, in our last phase of training over there. Some of these well-meaning but inexperienced and somewhat immature public officials, they said, they asked the Prime Minister, Madam, why don't you transfer powers to us, the district magistrates and the officials? We will deliver. Too much of political interference is causing problems. They all thought, even today many people tend to believe, in the middle classes, sometimes in the media and the officials, that we are the solution, politicians are the problem. That silly and totally undemocratic and totally wrong notion. So they expressed that in a very innocent manner. Mrs. Gandhi responded very simply. She said, look, during emergency, who are the people who abused powers? I gave the powers to all of you. It was you who abused the powers. So the notion that by undemocratic methods, by suppressing dissent, you actually can serve the people or prevent abuse of power is nonsensical. You will be led up the garden path. The regime will not survive. More important, the nation will pay a very heavy price. And there will be a squandered opportunity, because if there is angst there, like there is in Cockroach Janta Party, what is the angst? In my judgment, there is significant growth in India. 7-8% is not a small thing. Yeah, we wish it's even more. Yes, sometimes it's falling to 6% or something, 6.5%. And this Iran war made it more difficult. But big infrastructure is being built. There is genuine fiscal discipline. There's fiscal room now to attend to issues. And even today, our fuel price is one of the lowest in the world, lower than United States, lower than Europe, despite all the problems. And the public finances are supporting higher subsidies in the wake of this crisis. A lot of efforts are made. But the truth is, not today, for a long time in India, economic growth is touching everybody but not sufficiently. Only the 10-15% well off sections with good quality education, good fortune because of wealth and parentage, etc., good quality, relatively good quality education, urban living, and some network, and maybe a bit of capital. They are the ones who are flourishing in a modern economy. The 80% Indians from the low middle classes and the poor, the parents are struggling hard and sacrificing a great deal to send their children to schools, oftentimes at an unaffordable fee in budget private schools or some other private schools. And yet educational outcomes are nada. They're terrible. Skills are not there for no fault of theirs. Opportunities they don't see happening. And the healthcare system, while some efforts are being made, it's nowhere near what it should be. Therefore, education and healthcare have become the biggest sources of expenditure for the families. And in the absence of a pattern of development which addresses the need to absorb a large number of unorganized workers in a monthly secure wage, even if it's a relatively low wage initially, there must be a path to prosperity in the long term. Already, if I work hard for 10-15 years, here is the roadmap for me, for my family to come out of poverty, to go to middle class status. That's what people need. Poverty is never a big problem. Hopelessness is a big problem. Because our pattern of development is entirely big city centric and big capital centric mostly, because of foolish pseudo-socialist policies, bad regulation, regulatory cholesterol, and corruption, we missed many opportunities. We could not create large-scale employment where India has a natural advantage. Vietnam has taken over. China has taken over. China has something like $320 billion of garment and textile exports, and therefore creating millions of jobs at the low end of the spectrum, though they are much richer than other country, and there's a labor shortage. India does only $40 billion. This one number encompasses our failure to take advantage of the opportunity and then allow the poor to rise to middle class status. So there's a real challenge. There's no instant solution. The real problem. The angst is because of the problem. Now, they are not obligated to give us a solution. They are obligated to express their angst. Now, the constructive response would be for the political system across the spectrum, union and states, those in power and opposition, and the public intellectuals and the elites of the country. We have to get together and figure out where have we gone wrong? Where have we done right? How do we preserve the right things, good things, and how do we correct the wrong things? That is the correct response. Not vilifying, not destroying. Take Vijay's victory in Tamil Nadu. One of the best governed states by Indian standards despite the corruption, with pretty good human resource development index compared to the rest of India. Large employment generation by Indian standards both at the high end and at the low end, textiles and garments and so on and so forth. Two strongly rooted parties, the young people simply threw them out in a way that almost nobody in India predicted. So there is something happening out there. It's happening in states which have seen significant growth. Last year, Tamil Nadu growth rate was 11.5% or something. A phenomenal growth rate by any standard. And you can't ask for more. So there is something happening. It's not created by Cockroach Janata Party. They are a response, maybe ineffective response, maybe immature response, maybe not very thoughtful response, but they are a genuine response to a genuine problem. It's our duty to construct that deconstruct that and then understand why it is happening and then find the solutions and mobilize society in that direction.
So on that front, you brought the nuance that is in the angst, residing in the angst, right? Right now, the primary demand is resignation of the education minister.
No, those should not be taken too seriously. I don't take the demands, I've seen them. These are very, pardon my saying so, very immature, somewhat juvenile demands. Judges should not have second opinion. In the order of priority, India's challenges and the challenges youngsters face, what are these issues? This is like a very C-grade Bollywood film kind of a response. That's not the material issue. The demands are not the material issue. No experienced person will take the demands per se seriously. The angst is real. The problem is real. They are not here obligated to offer a solution. That they could not offer a solution does not delegitimize that protest or the genuine problem. We must separate these two issues. Because they came up with some silly demands doesn't make the concern silly.
So on the fact that these demands are immature or silly, for example, resignation as a demand. Demands like this make it easier for people to mobilize as well, right? If you bring in nuance, it's difficult
But they also become easy to make it easier to delegitimize them. Because they become hyper polarizing and hyper partisan. Instead of focusing on the issue, now it's about a party, a government, a minister. You are now seeing an individual as a villain. The reality is much more complicated. For 50 years, a pattern of development has failed the young people of the country. It's not one minister, not one secretary, not one government, not one party. It's a silly, absurd notion.
So then how do you define accountability? If this person does not resign, if this bureaucrat is not held accountable, where is accountability in the system?
See, for broader policy framework, there cannot be day-to-day accountability. Accountability is only the electorate. Specific acts of malfeasance, abuse of power, damage to public interest, there could be immediate accountability institutionally, whether it is through legislative committees or the law courts or the prosecution, etc. But broader policy failings because of ideological blinkers, for instance, in the name of socialism, what did we do? We protected the organized sector, which is very minuscule in India, at the cost of the unorganized sector. Therefore, in effect, we basically prevented job creation at the low end of the spectrum. And that is a central cause of the crisis in this country. Now, this is a socialist blinkers. Now, shall I therefore assemble all the socialists and pseudo-socialists and say you all go to jail? That doesn't work. So, accountability can be for individual actions of malfeasance and abuse of power, not for broad policy failures over a long term. The only accountability is if you persevere, and if people are dissatisfied, we vote you out. Indian people do that. The amount of volatility in India is unprecedented in democratic world. In elections, even if the same party comes back to power, at the Lok Sabha level or State Assembly level, 60 to 65% of the incumbents are not again re-elected. 60 to 65% are not re-elected. That is some sort of accountability. Yes, people are lashing out because they don't know what else to do, because they don't have the solutions. But people are expressing their anger and showing that in the form of vote. That is accountability. If you don't read it right, if you're really lost in your power game, who is the chief minister, kissa kursi ka, rather than what is the policy, then the elites of the country, political, bureaucratic, judicial, and the media and other elites of the country, they're driving the country to despair. That could upset the whole constitutional order itself.
So you brought about this electoral accountability, and then you also brought up Vijay, which I also wanted to bring in. Indian people, as we call traditionalists, right? People who go by the old norms of politics, Indian politics, they firmly believe that India votes on caste across states, right? This mobilization of the Cockroach Janta Party seems to be on issues: NEET paper leak, unemployment, or CBSE failure. Vijay's electoral victory also, as far as I have read, there is not a lot of caste analysis to it. It seems like young people as a collective are voting. Do you see, and this might be too soon to ask, but do you see hope that young people can actually get India out of caste politics?
Absolutely. Even in general, while caste is still playing a significant role in political choices, it would be wrong to say it's entirely caste-based. If that is the case, Indian democracy would have been dead. It would have been like Afghanistan's Loy Jirga. This tribe has this number, that tribe has that number, the tribal lords, overlords sit there and they simply give their numbers or the weapons. There's nothing left. How come in India, a party that gets together as, let's say, a social coalition, basically, instead of saying that is caste combination, politely we're saying social coalition. They got together broadly. How come they're losing next time very badly? So a significant section of each community, while probably a significant section votes according to caste lines yet, which is not a very good thing, but a significant section is a floating vote. That is what is safeguarding our democracy. That's why no party in India at the national level or state level can take the people for granted. You may exhibit that arrogance for some time if you got a resounding mandate, or so you thought. But if you don't really deliver effectively and communicate to people what are the strengths and weaknesses, what is it that we have to do collectively to change things for the better, and then people are willing to be patient also. If you don't do that, then you will be thrown out. It's happened time and again. In fact, for about 30 years, from let's say 1984 onwards to about 2010 or so, it was axiomatic in India that a party in power would inevitably lose the election. So caste issues, even otherwise, were not impenetrable. But caste did play a role, it does play a role. That's a fact. It will take some more time. But ultimately, that alone will not save the political parties. So those who simply stitch together a caste or religious combination, if they think that they are invincible, I think history has proven time and again. And urban voters,
Yes.
young voters, and women, probably these three groups, urban, young, women, they are a little less attracted to caste as the primary means of political mobilization. I'm sure again there are some people. I'm not saying 100 or nil. We're talking about broad trends.
Yes.
Women tend to be a little more practical. They're not viewing political office as one of patriarchal system or hierarchies or power for power's sake. They're looking at service delivery, what happens to their children,
Yes.
education, healthcare skills, and incomes. Young people, by the very nature, are idealistic, and they are somewhat insulated from the societal weaknesses like this caste prejudice and so on and so forth. Hopefully,
Yes.
and urban people, the more urban you are, the more likely that you treat caste as just another issue, but you primarily focus on your personal interest. What's happening to your kids' education, your family's health care, your incomes, your proper housing, or some vertical mobility, etc. So as urbanization increases, as political maturity increases, I think caste will be diluted. But caste is never an impenetrable issue, right from 1947. Even in the earliest days of independence, when we knew nothing else, caste was important. It would be wrong to say it's not important, but it was never either dominant or decisive.
Okay. So now that there seems to be some unification beyond caste lines on important issues, we don't know how long it will last, but at least TVK and Cockroach Janta Party show that there is some possibility of that, right? I want to understand a democratic churn that happens. This will probably be my last question for this, right? Mainstream political parties as of now in India, most of them are family driven. Most of them are deeply hierarchical in a way that is not democratic. And this generation, the generation that is already online, the generation that I think has the most exposure to outside world as well, that is also important. They've seen functioning of other democracies, right? They can see it on their phones at this point in time, right? They now have a model to aspire to, or at least they have a counter model to it. They have an imagination that is there, right? Do you think the major national parties, any of them, I'm not saying the ruling dispensation, any major national party or state level party is finding it increasingly difficult to be relevant to these people, and that is why these people are creating a new force?
I think so. Ordinarily, political parties are about interest aggregation. It's about translating people's angst and concerns into tangible policy formulation and then marketing it effectively, communicating to people and deriving a mandate. I think it appears our political system is largely fossilized. The governing combine at the national level is genuinely focusing on infrastructure, investment, and economic growth. We may disagree with specifics, but I think it's a fair statement to say, without being partisan, and fiscal responsibility. The opposition seems to be focusing entirely on redistribution and welfare without looking at the pattern of economic development and growth. They're almost rejecting the importance of economic growth. In fact, the word economic growth and prosperity does not even enter their lexicon. And they're pretending that in a poor country, distributing poverty is an answer. Now, there are limits to that approach. The answer is inclusive growth, changing the pattern of economic growth, making sure that the small towns grow, small employment grows, unorganized sector becomes organized sector, a viable, sensible, long-term welfare model, even if we can't do it overnight on a grand scale, improvement of educational outcomes, particularly at school level, and enhancing the skills. And we have done great disservice to our people in the country. Many of the Cockroach Janata Party adherents, I can't call them members or anything, but the people who put their finger there and said like, many of them, for no fault of theirs, after working hard and parent sacrificing, many of them do not have employable skills. It is our failure, not their failure, not their parents' failure. Healthcare in shambles, instead of addressing on what the state needs to do in terms of collective goods, that is the primary purpose of the state, and in terms of rule of law, and in terms of giving opportunity and dignity to everybody by an inclusive pattern of growth, like small town development, like improving the quality of life. Look at Bangalore. It is a symbol of traffic jams. When you say Bangalore, apart from the technology stuff, traffic jams. Delhi, a symbol of pollution globally now. Hyderabad, a symbol of both. We're competing with both the cities and both. So if this is your pattern of development, if simple quality of life issues, Hyderabad has no water despite pumping millions upon millions of gallons of water from Krishna and Godavari, more than 200 liters per day is pumped to Hyderabad, nothing reaches our homes. It's a disgrace. So state fulfilling its basic duties of collective responsibilities, collective goods, and education, healthcare, small town development, and minimal rule of law, along with economic growth that is attempted with such other correctives that are required to make it much more robust and much faster and much more durable. That is the way forward. So unless we move in that direction, you will have inchoate discontent. It may or may not find a sensible direction, but it may lead to the street action, sometimes uncontrolled. It may lead to a dangerous escalation. The parties in power at the state level, particularly because states are where the public order is, police are with the state, they may feel compelled to crush it. The middle classes, the well-heeled middle classes and elites, they may say, what is this nuisance on the streets? We can't allow freedom like this. If not emergency, something similar to it, but on a much more decentralized scale, may happen all over the country. That's a terrible response. Democracy is not very pretty. But unless there's a constructive response from the ruling elites and the opposition, and the elites of India in general, this has the potential to become a problem, but it's a great opportunity in my judgment. Do we have the wisdom to embrace this opportunity and have a constructive response? Or are we dumb enough to think that status quo is okay, for the time being we'll manage it and manipulate it and crush it, things will be okay. It may lead to a tremendous outburst.
So I said this is my last question, but I have too many follow-ups. So I'll try to squeeze them all in one question, and I want short responses from you. We have talked about what should the government do, increase feedback and sort of work on that, right? A, what should the leading opposition party, both national level and the state level, what should opposition parties do? A, and B, how should youngsters then channelize this angst also in a productive manner? Two questions.
Opposition parties must immediately do what they had attempted while Vajpayee ji was in power. I have some acquaintance from the sidelines. The then Congress party actually went back to the drawing board. They thought they would not get power for a long, long time. 2004 was a fluke. Unexpected. I didn't expect it. Nobody seriously expected that. It was a fluke. People said Vajpayee ji was the only man who said it could happen. Otherwise, everybody was gung-ho. India shining, economic growth, that. Some very good things were happening in the country. So they didn't anticipate getting power. So they were humble. They were trying to go back to the drawing board and relook at the model and learn with humility from all over the country, listening. Parties have given up that now. They must go back to that. Listen, and there are very fine minds in the country, broadly non-partisan, sympathetic to political process, not reviling politics, not saying politician is a bad fellow. That is a very popular pastime of Indian middle classes and even media and sometimes even judiciary. It's an absurd response in a democracy. There are serious people who love the country, who love freedom, who love democracy, and who want economic growth, who want harmony in society. sit with them, the finest minds in the country in a variety of sectors. They are self-selecting.
Yes.
If you are willing, they're there. That's not a problem. And then redraw the strategy. Government, in my judgment, must constitute an official commission with the highest, the greatest minds of the country with enormous experience, unimpeachable integrity, commitment to public good. And there are people from all branches of government or outside government, in business. Intelligence is not a repository of those in government. If you think that government has all the solutions, then we'll be a sad country. Not only to look at economic model, and not only economic growth part of it, I think a lot of people are doing something, macroeconomic management, but this inclusive growth model on the one hand, and two, the bigger governance challenges, rule of law, electoral system, which is leading to 30, 40 crores electoral expenditure at the assembly level, and it has consequences, bureaucratic and accountability, centralization of power. You have to one day grapple with these big challenges. Not that they can be solved overnight, but there must be a roadmap, and there must be an effort to build political consensus. Agitators, if they are smart, if they are wise, they must choose the most credible people across the spectrum, not one or two as symbols, who can bring enormous wealth of knowledge and understanding and passion and a broader approach as to how to give a direction to this movement in order to push the political system into doing right things. Because typically what happens is, if the agitation has clear understanding of what the goals are, the major parties embrace it automatically. Take the Tea Party movement in the United States. Republican Party made it their own. Take the Occupy Wall Street movement. Democratic Party made it their own. Take something else. So that is a normal thing. See, your concerns and agitation and angst, they are transmitted to the political system in an orderly way. Then they become grand electoral issues. Then the people decide what they want. Then you get into office and change things. That is the normal route. If there is a disconnect between the angst of the people and the political party's behavior and electoral conduct, then there is a problem. We must not allow that to happen.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot.